We're going to call this meeting to order. Good evening. This is the April 26th, 2023 meeting of the San Francisco County Transportation Community Advisory Committee, or CAC. I'm Kevin Ortiz. I'm the chair of the CAC, and our vice chair is member Siegel, Kat Siegel. Before I give the chair's report, I'd like to ask Elijah Saunders, our clerk this evening, to do a roll call to ensure we have a quorum, and then he will read an announcement about public comment.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Member Bars?
Bars present.
Bars present. Member Chen? Chen absent. Member Daniels?
Daniel's present.
Daniels present. Member Davidson? Davidson absent. Member Ho? Ho present. Member Levine?
Levine present.
Levine's present. Member Ortega?
Ortega present.
Ortega present. Member Ortiz?
Ortiz present.
Ortiz present. Member Roselle?
Roselle present.
Roselle present. Member Siegel?
Siegel present.
Siegel present. Chair, we have quorum. Allow me to read a brief public comments announcement. Public comment will be available for each item on this agenda via telephone by calling one of the numbers listed on the front of the agenda or joining the meeting through the Zoom link. Once you join, you will be able to listen to the meeting as a participant. To make public comment on an item, when the item is called, members of the public participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9. Do not press *9 or you'll be removed. Do not press *9 again or you'll be removed from the queue. When you are asked to unmute yourself, press *6 or the unmute button to unmute yourself. The live operator will advise that you will be allowed 2 minutes to speak. When your 2 minutes are up, we will move on to the next caller. Best practices are to speak slowly, clearly, and turn down the volume of any televisions or radios around you. Thank you. That concludes my announcement.
Hey, thank you, Clerk Saunders. This week, Clerk Saunders shared the Executive Director's report with us that was presented to the Transportation Authority Board at its April 25th meeting. The report is also available on the agency's website at www.sfcta.org. So for my report, I'm also excited to share that Speaker Emerita Pelosi is recommending $3 million in congressionally directed funding to modernize an elevator at Part 16th Street Station. This CAC urged staff on the board to find funding for these elevators, which are critical for folks who need to use them and that serve a station located in an equity priority community. The board nominated the 16th Street elevators for one Bay Area grant funding at the end of 2022, but unfortunately MTC, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, did not award funding. I'm thankful for Speaker Emerita Pelosi's support, and I'm hopeful this funding will be approved by Congress. At the request of Commissioner Chan, Transportation Authority staff have begun the District 1 multimodal transportation study. The effort will engage the community to identify known mobility challenges and develop a near to long-term strategies to improve transportation reliability and safety and shift trips to transit, walking, biking, and other non-driving options. The study will also identify strategies to reduce emissions and congestion for trips that start and end with District 1 while promoting economic vibrancy. The District 1 study has its first virtual event taking place this Thursday, April 27th at 6 p.m. Members of the public may participate in Spanish, Russian, and Chinese. For more information, visit sfcta.org/D1study. This effort is funded through the sales tax neighborhood program. For our May CAC meeting, SFMTA staff have agreed to provide an update on its commuter shuttle program, which was a CAC initiated request that I'm glad to see up on an upcoming agenda. Before transitioning to meeting management, thank you to our public commenters and Vice Chair Siegel for requesting that CAC meeting recordings be made available to the public. Our meeting recordings are now posted on the Transportation Authority's YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/SFCTA and on individual meeting pages on our website at sfcta.org/events. Meeting management. So for CAC members, I know it's our first time using the microphones in a while. So if you'd like to speak, you can indicate so by standing your name card on its end, so it is pointing up. I ask CAC members and presenters to wait on it until I call on you to speak. Then press the red star on the base of your microphone to turn it on. You should see a red light turn on below the mouthpiece. Please turn off the microphone when done speaking by pressing the red star again. We have a long agenda, so let's please limit your questions to a max of 2 per agenda item. Presenters, please only respond to questions if requested by the chair. CAC members and folks in the hearing room, please turn off or silence all electronic devices and computer notifications during the meeting. Please step outside to the elevator lobby if you must talk or do anything else that might be picked up on the microphones. That's it for announcements. Are there any questions or comments from CAC members on the chair's report? Seeing none, let's open it up to public comment.
Yes, we have one public comment. Okay, Roland, you can unmute yourself or go ahead. Your 2 minutes begins now.
Yeah, thank you for unmuting me. So very quickly, with regards to Speaker Emerita Pelosi, these emails are not a lot of money, but I hope that either she or her staff communicated to you that the whole point of these emails is to get you with projects on the FTA radar. That's the whole point. This is what this is all about. Now, with regards to the recordings and streaming on YouTube, I really appreciate that. One thing I would really appreciate is that if you could enable the Save Transcript button in the transcript. I'm saving all transcripts. They're all in one place. What allows me to do is to search that directory, find what I'm looking for, and that transcript will point you directly to the video so that I can go back and look at it again. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more public comment. Okay, Shakisha, go ahead. Your 2 minutes begins now.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if I could have the chance to present as well, because I had something to put into this organization and the movement of transportation.
Would that make most sense to have, since it's not on the agenda and we have a long schedule, would it make most sense to have comment on that at the end for open comment? Or push it to the next meeting?
Yeah, thank you, Danielle. Please hold all general public comments to the end of the general public comment section. And in addition, please make sure that it's on something that's under the TA's purview. If there's no more public comment, let's move on to the next item.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, caller.
Great, we're gonna now move on to the consent agenda. Items 3 through 5 comprise the consent agenda. Staff is not planning to present on these items. If a CAC member wishes, any of these items may be removed and considered separately. Vice Chair Siegel.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a motion to make 2 small corrections to the minutes. Can I do that as part of the one item? Okay, great. So for the minutes for item 11, there's a request that's misattributed to me for a presentation from the SFPD on work to deter bike theft, and this was actually requested by member Bars. And then on the various items where a vote was taken, which includes the consent agenda and items 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, member Roselle is listed as a nay vote rather than an absence. So I just wanted to make a motion to correct those items before the draft minutes are finalized.
Do we have a second? Member Barr, second.
Definitely me.
So can we have a motion on this to just amend the agenda or just amend the minutes?
So first we need to take public comment, and then we will take a vote on the amendment and then a vote on the consent agenda.
Great. Do we have public comment?
There's no public comment for this item.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend the minutes by member Siegel and a second by member Bars. On the amendment, member Bars.
Bars, aye.
Bars, aye. Member Chen is absent, excuse me. Member Daniels.
Daniels, aye.
Daniels, aye. Member Davidson, absent. Member Ho.
Oh, aye.
Ho, aye. Member Levine.
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Ortega.
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Member Ortiz.
Ortiz, aye.
Ortiz, aye. Member Roselle.
Roselle, aye.
Roselle, aye. Member Siegel.
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. There are, I believe, 8 ayes. The amendment is approved. Do we have a motion on the consent agenda with the minutes as amended?
This is Member Siegel, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Moved by Siegel, do we have a second?
Roselle, second.
Seconded by Roselle. On the consent agenda with the minutes as amended, Member Bars.
Bars aye.
Bars aye, Member Chen absent. Member Daniels.
Daniels, aye.
Member Daniels, aye. Member Davidson, welcome, Member Davidson.
Aye.
We're just voting on the consent agenda. Member Siegel made a motion to amend the minutes to correct a couple mistakes. But would you like to vote aye or nay on the consent agenda?
Aye.
Member Davidson, aye. Member Ho?
Oh, I.
Ho, aye. Member Levine?
Levine, I.
Levine, aye. Member Ortega?
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Member Ortiz?
Ortiz, aye.
Ortiz, aye. Member Roselle?
Roselle, I.
Roselle, aye. Member Siegel?
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. We have 9 ayes. The consent agenda is approved.
Great, we're gonna now move on. Did we take public comment actually on that item? Or on that second item? Okay, good. So yeah, let's move on to the end of the consent agenda, item number 6, which is adopting a motion of support to approve programming priorities for up to 5.6 million in San Francisco's estimated fiscal year 2023-2024 state transit assistant community or county block grant funds. Presenting will have Anna Laforte, Deputy Director of Planning and Policy and Programming, the CTA.
Okay, give me just a moment. I'm pulling up my slides. Thank you, Elijah. Anna Lafort, Deputy Director for Policy and Programming. Nice to see you all tonight. I'm here to present this item on the State Transit Assistance Block Grant Funds. This is a program that was established by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission in 2018. This is funding that is given to the congestion management agencies in the form of a block grant. These revenues are from the state sales tax on diesel fuel. So they are dependent on diesel fuel prices. And as we know, they have gone up and down, volatile funding source. This particular funding source may be used for transit operating and capital needs. So it's one of the few sources that we have at SFCTA for ongoing operations type projects. And only transit operators are eligible to receive these funds. And we're bringing the item to you tonight in order to make sure we can give the materials to MTC by May 15th, which is when they require us to tell them how we are spending funds. So since 2018, San Francisco has programmed these funds to paratransit and projects that we have identified through what we created in 2018, which was the San Francisco Lifeline Transportation Program. And for paratransit, when we created the program, prior to the block grant, one of the ways that these funds were used for regional paratransit funding source for transit operators. And so we continued the funding levels for the block grant to be in line with what MTA had received prior to this becoming a block grant. And for the San Francisco Lifeline Transportation Program, similarly, there was a regional Lifeline Transportation Program that was funded prior to the block grant. So we created a San Francisco program, and this is to support projects that improve mobility for low-income folks. And because we had found during our equity assessments during the San Francisco Transportation Plan several years ago, that addressing gaps to and barriers to transportation is one of the ways to address equity in the city. So this is just an illustration of how we have used the funds in the past. The paratransit program has been a constant since the program was established in 2018. And for the last 2 cycles, we have used the funds for the elevator attendant program that BART contracts with a contractor to provide, this is at the downtown stations in San Francisco, and I'll speak more to the program in just a moment. The elevator attendant program, though, we've found that it continues to respond to needs that were only exacerbated with the pandemic, such as safety and security issues. So how we are recommending to program the 5.3 million or so in funds that are available to San Francisco for next fiscal year. MTC recommends programming only up to 95% of those funds with a contingency plan if revenues come in at the full 100% estimate. And so what we are recommending is that, consistent with past programming cycles, 3.3 million for the MTA's paratransit program, and that also includes the essential trip card. And we also recommend programming $2.3 million, which would be up to the full 100% estimate, to BART's elevator attendant program, which we fund through the SF Lifeline Transportation Program, which is funded by State Transit Assistance Funds. So speaking specifically to the programs that we are recommending for funding, so this is the paratransit program that the SFMTA operates. There are both ADA services and non-ADA services. The ADA services include the pre-scheduled vans that folks are able to access, as well as group van trips and inter-county trips. And then the non-ADA services include the essential trip card, which is a program that MTA created a couple of years ago to provide vouchers for subsidized vouchers for seniors and folks with disabilities who are not able to use fixed route transit but are not necessarily part of the ADA program. And the next program is the elevator attendants. This is operated by under contract through BART, but both SFMTA and BART have a relationship for an agreement for cost sharing and splitting up the funding of the project, because the two agencies jointly utilize these elevators at the 4 downtown stations shown on your screen. These are elevator attendants that are operating through the nonprofit Urban Alchemy, and they monitor the elevators, and there are attendants there, and they improve safety and mobility, accessibility for customers who are relying on these elevators, as well as encouraging economic recovery for the downtown and encouraging folks to take transit, which is one of the outcomes that we are hoping for. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions, and we have BART and MTA staff here.
Great, thank you, Anna. Do we have questions from our members? Please stack your cards so I can see visually, if so. I see a member Ortega.
Hi. Hi, Maria. Actually, my question is related to the presentation real quick, but I wanted to address it before the end of the meeting. The Zoom screen is showing every single panel during the presentation, making it hard to read the slides. If we could minimize that during presentations, I would appreciate that. Otherwise, thank you for the presentation. It was very informative.
Great, thank you for that. Do we have any questions, particularly around this item from members? Seeing none, I'm gonna raise my hand real quick. And I just had a couple questions, and thanks for the presentation, Anna. I have just two kind of like pretty like pointed questions, but I'll start with my first one, which what is the contract process for Urban Alchemy being decided as the vendor for this program, for the elevator attendant?
I mean, like BART staff to present and then or to respond to your question. So let me just hop away.
You don't mind repeating the question again, I'm sorry?
Yeah, so I was wondering particularly what's the process for deciding which vendor, particularly for Urban Alchemy, being decided as the vendor for the elevator program?
So, well, first I introduce myself. My name is Irene Hernandez. I'm a principal grants officer at BART. I'm the liaison for San Francisco projects. elevator attendant program has been in existence since 2018, and it was launched as a pilot. And at the time, our planning department broke a relationship with Hunters Point to provide services, specifically looking at the services that the agency had provided for the pit stop, which were taking place in San Francisco at the time. So we began using the agency for those services, and then one of the staff members became the ED for Urban Alchemy, which I believe was launched or created in 2019 as a community-based organization in San Francisco. We have since then had a contract with them, and that contract is being expanded from this June on, I think, 2 more years. And after that, we may go out for bids to look at contractors for the service. So we currently have a contract with them that will end this summer.
Great, thank you for that, Eileen. I think one thing I would just quote on, or I would just, caution particularly, I know these are particularly for the downtown elevators, but I think like if in the event that, this program has expanded out for other stations within, it'd be good to have community-based organizations that are from the community, particularly like some of the mission-based organizations being able to have elevator attendants, particularly from those organizations within the community in order to build trust accordingly. I think I do have some concerns just given the high level of mismanagement that's happened, particularly with Urban Alchemy, that I would also caution. Yeah, and then I think, the other thing is I'll just say for the record, I'm disappointed again that like we're seeing also just the downtown continue to get funded, and we're also seeing some of our other stations not necessarily receiving, services across the board, particularly for the elevator program, just in general, just because it's great that we just got money for an earmark for going to the mission particularly, but I think like we should see the same level of services for downtown also happening with all the stations reverberating out to Balboa. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks for your comments and feedback.
Do we have any other questions, comments, members? Of course.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question, Charities, and thank you for the presentation. Charities' question made me wonder. It says that the goal of the elevator attendant program is to improve the safety, mobility, and accessibility for BART and MTA customers. I'm just curious, how do we know if that's true? Like, are we achieving those goals with this program and this funding?
To start, okay. We submit data to SFCTA on a quarterly basis, showing the usage of the elevators and also the number of people who use elevators who are using a wheelchair, people who have strollers, whether or not there's any incidents. Because before the program, there was a lot of concerns and complaints that BART was receiving about people using the elevators to use the bathroom, for example. So like we're tracking any bio-waste incidents in elevators. With that data, we can show that one, the usage has increased, and we capture both qualitative and quantitative information. So we know that people feel more safe, and thank the elevator attendants for being there. We have elevator attendants inside each elevator throughout all the 21 hours that we provide service. So we have data for the whole day and all the hours of service.
Is that in the memo? We wanted to see the criteria, the data. Let's see it.
I can't remember if we provided it in the application, or if it's in the BART attendance program details. It does talk about the performance metrics, but I guess it doesn't have outcomes from past years that I can find quickly anyway. So, but happy to share the information that we have received for reporting in the past.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Bars. Member Roselle?
First, I just want to say that I support the 2 other members and their questioning, and just want to say that I was recently on the BART going to the BART and using the elevators with a friend of mine in the wheelchair. And it was actually really good that the tenants were there, because otherwise there were people waiting to use them to shoot up and use other drugs. So they actually did kind of help ensure that the negative activity wasn't just moving into there. So I have had firsthand experience of the success of them. So I just felt I should speak on behalf of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Roselle. Member Davidson?
Also wanted to +1. all
Jay,
of
Anna,
my-
would you pass the mic to Drew, please? Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to agree with all my colleagues and also say that I would like to see elevator attendants all the way down to Balboa Station. I've used Balboa Park Station, and recently when I was using the elevator, the actual swipe cards don't work all the way through. So for example, if you're exiting the BART and trying to use the elevator that goes up to the street, you can't, I couldn't use my swipe card, basically. And I had to walk up the stairs to have the BART attendant buzz me in. And I was with somebody that needed to have like basically elevator access. And if I were in a wheelchair or I was alone with my son in a stroller, I would have been stuck. So having that attendant would be really useful at Balboa Park.
Thank you, Member Davidson. Do we have any other questions, comments from members? Seeing none, can we have public comment?
Checking for public comment. There is no public comment for item 6.
Great, can we have a motion on this item? Motion. Great, Member Ho makes the motion. Do we have a second?
Ortega, second.
Member Ortega, second. Can we take this by acclamation?
Yes, we can take this by same call. With no objection. It's approved.
Great, let's move on to item 7. I do love being able to do that. So no, item 7 is going to be adopting a motion of support to adopt the school access plan final report. Presenting is going to be David Long for a transportation planner. And then we also have a few folks from SFMTA and SFUSD in attendance as well.
Right, thank you, Chair. Am I good to go?
You're good to go.
Alright. Thank you, Elijah, for sharing my slides. I'll say next slide when it's time. As Chair mentioned, I'm David Long, a transportation planner here at the TA. I'm pleased to present to you today San Francisco School Access Plan. Before we start though, I'd like to acknowledge some of our partners without whom this work would not have been possible. First and foremost, that includes the caregivers and students who took time to share their experiences, ideas, and feedback throughout the process. The plan is also the product of strong partnerships in San Francisco Unified School District, the SFMTA, the Department of Children, Youth, and their families, and Caltrans. Here's our agenda for today. I'll start by discussing study goals, then give you an overview of the outreach approach and findings before sharing draft strategies, our evaluation, and finally recommendations. Next slide. We have 3 study goals. The first is to improve the quality and availability of transportation options to school and after school activities, especially for vulnerable caregivers and students. The second is to ensure school-related transportation options are safe. And the third is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, localized congestion, and air pollution around school sites. Specifically, the plan focuses on kindergarten through 5th grade students in SFUSD schools who need to take medium and long distance trips. We're focusing on these long distance trips for younger students, partly because previous work by the Transportation Authority has found that these types of trips are especially challenging for caregivers. Partly, we're also focusing on these because San Francisco has a Safe Routes to School program, which focuses on improving the school trip for caregivers and students who live close enough to school that they can bike or walk. So the school access plan is intended to complement that work by identifying strategies to improve the school commute for students who live far from school. Next slide. Here's an overview of the study's outreach approach. So early in the pandemic, we partnered with the Department of Children, Youth, and their families to talk with students at 9 community hubs and equity priority communities across San Francisco. The art you see in the presentation today is from students at these events who were asked to draw how they would like to get around. These conversations were followed by focus groups with caregivers, where we've heard about the challenges of the school commute and ideas for solutions. That information was used to develop a long list of draft strategies. Draft strategies were refined through a series of 5 in-language workshops with caregivers, and further shaped by feedback gathered through a survey, 6 pop-up events at school sites, and 2 online town halls. Next slide. Here's a list of the community-based organizations and SFUSD affiliated groups who we reached out to. Outreach recruitment and events were designed to ensure voices from a wide selection of caregivers were heard, especially residents in areas of the city with a school capacity deficit, English language learners, and caregivers with low incomes. Next slide. So moving on to strategies, we drafted strategies in 5 categories, which responded to caregiver input about needs. These strategies focused on improving transportation options, on safety, communication and information, on reducing costs for caregivers, and finally, we developed some strategies specific for foster and homeless youth, because they have some unique needs and operate in a unique legal context. Next slide. We identified high-performing strategies by applying an evaluation framework. The framework measured strategies' expected performance in 6 categories, which was informed by our second round of outreach, including surveys, pop-up events, and strategy workshops. Next slide. This figure shows the results of strategy evaluation. We're calling our 6 highest performing strategies our top-tier strategies. These included infrastructure safety improvements, transit trainings, loading zone guidance, shuttles, transportation coordinators, and discount fare awareness. The next set of 3 strategies didn't score well enough to be considered core plan recommendations, but they showed some promise and could be revisited in the future after additional project development. These included an expansion of the Muni Transit Ambassadors Program, an electric bike lending library, and carpool coordination. Next slide. So let's discuss our top tier strategies. Our highest scoring strategy was infrastructure safety improvements. We're recommending expanding SFMTA's existing walk audit program, which brings together caregivers, school administrators, and SFMTA staff to discuss needs, then design and implement improvements. We're also recommending that SFMTA, together with SFUSD, develop and conduct transit trainings for youth to help young people feel comfortable riding transit and cultivate the next generation of transit riders. Moving on to loading zone guidance. Pickup and drop-off policies are currently developed ad hoc by individual school sites. SFMTA does coordinate with SFUSD's transportation department and school site administrators on loading zone needs, but San Francisco schools would benefit from a more consistent process for the development and implementation of pickup and drop-off management plans to ensure they're informed by best practices and guided by effective agency collaboration. We're recommending that this begin with SFMTA developing informational materials about best practices for school site administrators, as well as informational materials for caregivers about expected behaviors and norms. Next slide. Continuing down the list of top tier strategies, the shuttle strategy is a bit nuanced. We found really strong community interest for a shuttle strategy, which led to high scores on our community interest metrics. However, the concept scored poorly on our financial feasibility and implementation criteria, reflecting the reality that funding opportunities for new neighborhood shuttles are very limited at this time. When we asked caregivers what would be needed to make shuttles work, a lot of the must-have features they described included things like consistent drivers and routes, real-time tracking of their students, and specially trained drivers, were features that SFUSD has built into their current yellow school bus services. So the school access plan was originally intended to identify strategies that city agencies could pursue. These findings have led us to recommend that the city and the school district explore ways to expand SFUSD's existing yellow school bus services. Another way the city could support shuttle services is through the Department of Children, Youth, and their Families, funding nonprofits to provide transportation to after-school activities. The second strategy here involves employing transportation coordinators who are trained and deployed at either the school district level or individual school sites to improve communication and information sharing to caregivers around transportation issues. Our final top tier strategy involves improving the awareness of SFMTA's existing discounted fare programs. The cost did not feature prominently in our outreach discussions about barriers and needs, but some caregivers did share that they would use Muni more if it cost less. This sentiment was more common among caregivers with lower incomes. When we dug a bit deeper, we found that many folks were unaware of existing discounted fare programs they qualify for. So we're recommending that SFMTA work with SFUSD to include information about discounted fare programs in the school sign-up process. Next slide. We also have a series of policy recommendations focused on building planning capacity at SFUSD and on expanding and on updating existing city policies and regional planning processes to incorporate the needs of youth. Next slide, Elijah. With that, I'll include the presentation and answer any questions members have. Thank you.
Great, thank you, David. Let's open it up to questions for members. Members, do you have questions on this? Vice Chair Siegel.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for the presentation. I was just curious, did this study yield an estimated cost for the shuttle program that you discussed?
Thank you for the question. Costs for a shuttle program vary really widely depending on program design. So there's no specific cost estimate, but the report does lay out a service expansion scenario for SFUSD's yellow school bus services explicitly, which would bring us back to the level of service we had in 2014. So there is a more rigorous cost estimate for that yellow school bus service expansion.
Great, thank you. And then I just had a comment about the tier 2 Muni ambassador expansion suggestion. I know that was ranked lower because of the cost. And I would just encourage Muni to explore that option anyway. I've recently participated in an event where some students from SFUSD shared poems about their experiences on Muni, and I was struck by how many of them talked about incidents of harassment on public transit. So I would just love to see strategies to curb those kinds of safety issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Siegel. Member Roselle.
Yeah, I would just repeat the ambassador programs for school buses, because I've also seen or witnessed some bullying and harassment that does happen amongst older youth with younger youth, and I think that is a serious issue that needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Roselle. Do we have any other questions from members? Otherwise, I have a few. Member Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. I am struggling with this because I don't have a sense of from the presentation. Can you give me a sense of how many families would be affected by these strategies? And how much would we, by let's say, if we were to invest in these infrastructure, safety, transit trainings, like the top tier strategies, if we were to invest in these, what kind of change would we expect to see by families getting to school?
Thank you for the question. I think that the goal would be to see folks feel safer in their school commute. and folks have more convenient options, which reduce greenhouse gas emissions and localized congestion. So the study goals regarding who is reached, if we're able to expand the walk on it program and implement infrastructure safety improvements at more of our schools, every school trip ends at the school site. So that's going to affect everyone who travels that way. Transit trainings would reach a more limited population of caregivers, given that Muni currently has a relatively low mode share among school trips. But some of the barriers that we heard from caregivers and students during our outreach were, as you mentioned, as members commented during their comments about the MTAP program, feelings about personal safety, and one goal of the transit trainings is to help folks feel comfortable in that environment. So there's a potential to reach some caregivers and improve their school commute who are currently not riding Muni. Discounted fare awareness similarly would reach a smaller population, but a population with low incomes who are particularly interested in helping.
But can you quantify that?
Because every school trip ends at the school site. If we are
No, I guess, I mean, like, I am a parent and I have a small child who's not quite ready for elementary school, but will be soon. And I know many parents, and it is a huge problem to reliably get their kids to school, especially if they don't want to drive their children to school. And so like, this is a real problem. And I feel like part of my responsibility thinking about parents in my district is like, I don't have confidence from this work that these will meaningfully address their needs. And so that's why I'm poking and asking, like, how many people are specific schools like going to benefit? I'm sorry, I'm really not trying to be a pest here, but I don't have a sense of how many people and how much their lives will change from this.
we did not complete a rigorous quantitative analysis as part of this report. We did not perform a rigorous quantitative analysis as part of this report to define how many parents specifically's lives would be changed. But if these recommendations are implemented, I do believe that many caregivers will have safer and more convenient and more sustainable options for getting their students to school.
Yeah, if I may add, it does work. So it may be that many of these are right for a pilot to try and gauge how effective they may be, because I don't think anyone has a perfect crystal ball.
Thank you, Member Bars. Member Daniels?
Yes. Oops. Good afternoon. Thank you for your presentation. I also have a similar question along this same vein, just concerned about who's going to be monitoring the recommendations if they're implemented, because I am a part of elementary school PTA, and we just had a walk audit, which took a lot of heavy lifting to get done. And there seems to be no communication happening between MTA and USD, especially when it comes to the safety of the drop-off zone around schools. And the fact that schools can have no plan at all and MTA has no idea and people are harmed really, really bothers me. So my question is, who's gonna monitor the collaboration that's being recommended and the success of the work or the collaboration that's supposed to already be happening between MTA and SFUSD?
Yeah, thank you for the question. First, I'm really sorry to hear that you've had that experience that you didn't see change quickly. The Walk On It program is designed so that money to implement some low cost improvements is included in every Walk On It. So ideally, the program should work such that a Walk On It is conducted and then there is money there immediately available to implement some improvements. I guess I'd like to invite Archie Falcon, who I believe is on the line from SFCTA, to speak to the ongoing collaboration between his group, the Director of Transportation at SFCTA and SFCTA, perhaps speak to the questions there.
Good afternoon, evening, everyone. This is Archie Folk, and I'm the Executive Director of Transportation. We do meet and have collaborated greatly with SFMTA in regards to our yellow school bus drop-off zones. We have staff that regularly go out to schools to assure that when our buses pull up to schools, that students can come off safely, and buses can come in and out of the areas of school. So we have worked and continue to work with SFMTA. Also on my team, we have a duly funded position with Safe Routes to School. So if there is any concern from any school regarding safety of drop-offs, we send our team out to the school immediately to determine that the area is safe for drop-off. But I would like to get some information specifically on which school was being discussed, and David, you can give that to me offline, and I can have my team take a look at that as well.
Sure. Great. So I see Member Davidson, then me, and then Member Roselle.
Thank you for this presentation. It's also a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I have two young children, almost elementary school age, and am, in touch with many parents like myself with elementary school age children in the neighborhood in District 11. And what looking at this report, I see that half of all students live within 1 mile, and only 27% actually walk, right? Is there a way to have the goal be any child who lives within 1 mile of their school should be able to walk there by themselves? And what would that take for that to happen? After that, if you expand the net to 2 miles, that's 70% of the student body lives within 2 miles, and that's easily a bikeable distance. Could there also be another goal that says if you live up in the 1 to 2 mile zone, your child should be able to bike there safely? And so infrastructure improvements are crucial, but what I'm also not seeing is traffic monitoring. And what I mean by that is we don't have automated cameras that are capturing people blazing through stop signs. There are definitely dangerous intersections in my neighborhood. Either it's stop sign or speed cameras of any sort. And it's not just making sure that there's enough sidewalk space for folks, but it's also having more teeth in the policy as well. So anyway, I would love to see more goals around mode shift explicitly stated, because it's a huge opportunity if 70% of the student body is within walking and biking distance, and they're not of walking and if they're not of driving age, then we should capture that and we should be able to have them walk to school on their own. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. Would you like a response?
Sure. Yeah.
So the school access plan was intended to identify strategies specifically for those long distance trips. I'll invite my colleague at SFMTA, John Knox White, who I believe is on the line and manages San Francisco's Safe Routes to School program, which is meant to focus on shorter trips that can be walked and biked, to respond to some of the other thoughts, which I believe the Safe Routes to School program does have a mode shift goal, But I'll pass this off to John, who's intimately familiar with everything SFCTA does in that arena.
Krista Highfield, I think. Is it
Oh, Krista Highfield, excuse me.
Yes, hello. No worries. I'm Krista Highfield. I'm the Safe Route to School Program Coordinator, and I work with John Knoxwhite. So one thing that I'll say is, yes, the Safe Routes to School program does have a mode shift goal, trip reduction goal. For the ages covered by this report, the K through 5, we use a distance of half a mile rather than a mile for walkable because we have a large proportion of students who are very young. And while a mile is very doable, it's a very long, slow walk for our younger students in the K through 5. And one thing that I would like to add related to distance to and from schools, in the Safe Routes to School program, we do assess distance from schools and the percentage of mode split when we're prioritizing schools to reach out to. So we do every 2 years what we call a travel tally, where we assess the mode split at every SFUSD school. And then we compare with the distance that the students live, not on an individual basis, but percentages of distance the students live from the school. And we assess which have the most potential. So we identify the schools that have large proportions of students living within half a mile or a mile of their school, but that the school's mode split shows very high car usage. And we specifically target those schools for programming and resources to try to help those families connect with other modes, with walking, with biking, and with transit, and to some extent with carpooling. I can't help but mention that that's a very hard shift to make to carpooling for families, but we are in complete agreement. We definitely look at the schools that have high percentages living within half a mile and a mile, and then for our bike programming, up to 2 miles. And we prioritize the ones that have those large proportions of students within those distances, but high mode split for driving. Thank you.
Member Roselle, do you want to go first?
I was quickly just going to disclose that Tenderloin Community Benefit District, who I work for, and as the director of SAFE programs, I do work on the Safe Routes to School program. So I just wanted to be upfront about that and disclose that.
Thank you, Member Roselle. I have a couple questions on this. Thanks, David, for the presentation. So as a former after-school teen programs manager, I don't have any young children, but the running joke is that we have many children. It is an issue that is of concern to me. I was wondering if you could bring back up the slide with the long-term and short-term strategies really quickly. And the evaluation results. Perfect, thank you, Elijah. So I was wondering, I know that there was a big, appetite for shuttles, right? Can we just clarify really quickly that these shuttles are the yellow school bus shuttles?
So there are 3 implementation pathways outlined in the report for the shuttle strategy. One is yellow school buses. Another is for the Department of Children, Youth, and Their Families to fund shuttles run by nonprofits, which can help take kids to aftercare programs, something that they used to do in the past and have moved away from. We're recommending that, given what we've heard about the needs and that caregivers have expressed, that they bring back that programming. And then the third pathway is where neighborhood shuttles are currently already being scoped and piloted in our city, that those service plans include school trips specifically. So there are 3 pathways, one of which is the yellow school buses, as you mentioned.
Great. And I think we're all like big fans of like the after school school buses as well as the other. I think I'm a little curious because I know that one of those strategies is around the yellow school buses. SFCTA doesn't manage any of that. That would be SFUSD, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and so I know that that program costs about an average of $30 million a year to transport 3,500 students a year. So would SFCTA be helping to fund a pilot program to help the match cost for SFUSD? Or I guess I'm just curious, because if it's under the scope of SFUSD and it's a recommendation on it, it almost feels like it's just pushing the blame almost onto the district in itself.
Thanks for the question. Yellow school buses are difficult to operate, and this is a national problem. Costs are high and going up, but there is renewed state interest in supporting school transportation, especially through spring yellow school bus programs. An example is AB, I think it's 211. I need to look back at my notes to be sure, but there's some state legislation that recently passed that provides school districts, reimburses them a portion of their expenditures that they spend on home to school transportation. And SFUSD is currently working to access those funds and is hoping to expand their fleet by about 10 buses with those. So part of the recommendation involves working with SFUSD to make sure that we are applying for and pursuing all new funding opportunities as they arise. Another part of the recommendation, which does fall on SFUSD specifically, is to try and do a little bit of work to quantify the need for these services, which can then help us better advocate for funds.
Great, thank you for that, David. So I guess my second question is just particularly on the uni transit ambassadors as well too. I know I've already shared some of my concerns, particularly. I think you know, I would just like to say for the public, like really making sure that we're doing an investment for you know, some of our high risk communities and really moving that from a tier 2 strategy to being a top tier strategy, right? Just as all the public safety issues that are being reported on, particularly, I think it is top of mind for constituents, right? Folks in my district particularly. And so, you know, I would recommend that, you know, this top tier strategy includes the mini transit ambassadors, right? Particularly within sensitive communities as a whole. I do kind of also share some of the concerns though, just, the member bars shared. I just feel like transportation coordinators and transit trainings are great and all, but if the buses aren't running on time or they're not accessed right, it's not actually solving the problem as a whole. So it's like you're educating folks about the problem, but we're not actually solving the problem. So I'd like to hear just particularly, if there's thoughts for a pilot, what would actually be being considered to actually solve some of the root causes of these issues.
Sure, thanks. So regarding the transportation coordinators, we are recommending that sort of 2 implementation pathways. One is at the district level. Currently, the Educational Placement Center has counselors who work with families and students who are enrolling in SFUSD schools for the first time. And they work especially with newcomer families to our city. Those folks don't have any formal training on transportation issues. So we're recommending that SFMTA work with the Educational Placement Center at the district level to ensure that those counselors have the training and resources that they need to direct newly enrolling families to all the transportation programs that are available to them and help orient them to our pretty complex transportation ecosystem here. Then at the school site level, we're recommending that transportation coordinators be piloted at a beacon school, which is San Francisco's, which is a school in San Francisco that's implemented the community schools model, where nonprofit services are sort of better integrated at the school site level. There's a beacon coordinator who's responsible for a lot of that. And that person can do a variety of things, which extend beyond just transit, including serving as an informational resource, distributing information about discounted fare programs, organizing walk pools and bus pools or carpools with caregivers. There's a list of potential things that could be incorporated in that person's work program.
And so just a clarifying question on that. So the transportation coordinator would be an entirely new position funded through the SFCTA. Would it be managed then through SFMTA? Or I guess I'm just trying to understand the funding stream to the staffing.
Yeah, I need to pull up the funding strategy to be able to speak with absolute authority, but I believe that funding plan for the transportation coordinators partly through the Department of Children, Youth, and Their Families and that pilot program. And it could be a new role, or it could be incorporated into the job description work program of someone in one of these beacon programs.
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend it's the latter, right? Just given that, having it just as a billable hour of service, right, for our existing organizations versus creating an entirely new position that could be looped in. Our folks are probably already doing that as is, right, without the pay, right? So I think it'd be good just to have that for the organizations that already have that built-in trust versus, like I mentioned, offline about just really creating duplicative programs, right, and having to have the ramp up time to build the relationships and the trust when the trust is already established. But thank you for your work, and I know this is top of mind for a lot of our folks. So we appreciate your question, your answers on this, and your work. So I'll entertain a motion, or actually, I'm sorry, public comment.
We have no in-person public comment, Daniela.
Okay, checking for public comment, and also just a reminder, the raise your hand feature, you can use the raise your hand feature or dial *9 to raise your hand for public comment. And then you would hit *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, there is no public comment for item 7.
Great, now I'll entertain a motion.
This is Member Siegel. I move to approve the item.
Do you have a second? Member Roselle, second. Can we just open up for discussion really quickly on this motion? I would just, when would be the next time that we were able to get an update on this program and the implementation about a potential pilot?
David, let me know if you have a different thought, but I think that would probably have been a couple of months that the appropriate venue might be within the PROPEL 5-year prioritization programs for some of them where the TA can provide funding. But for a broader update, David, do you have an answer? Otherwise, we can get back to you.
I don't have a timeline in mind, but I'd be happy to work with you and make sure that we get this calendared if you'd like an update.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, a couple months, what we want it done, not necessarily like quickly in the sense of like rushing it, right? Like, so take the time needed, but I think, hopefully within like maybe the next 3 to 6 months. Great. Can we take this without or by acclamation?
No.
Okay, great. Let's do a roll call vote.
On item 7, Member Bars.
Just talk loud, Sarah.
Bars, no.
Bars, no. Member Daniels.
Daniels, aye.
Daniels, aye. Member Davidson.
Davidson, aye.
Davidson, aye. Member Ho.
I also can, aye.
Oh, aye. Member Levine.
Levine, aye.
Levine, aye. Member Ortega.
Ortega, aye.
Ortega, aye. Member Ortiz.
Ortiz abstain.
Ortiz abstains. Member Roselle.
Roselle abstain.
Roselle abstain. And Member Siegel.
Siegel, aye.
Siegel, aye. We have 6 ayes, 1 no, and 2 abstains. The motion is approved.
Great, let's move on to item 8, which is Vision Zero SFMTA Agency Active Communities Plan. Presenting, we'll have Chris Webb from the department. It's my first time meeting him in person today.
Thank you. Good evening to the CAC and Thanks for the welcome, Chair team. So I do understand you have a pretty packed agenda, so I will try to keep things relatively brief. My name is Christopher Kidd. I am the project manager for the Active Communities Plan, and I'm a planner for the Police Street section of our planning subdivision at SFMTA. I wanted to provide an information item to you that I presented yesterday at the TA board on the Active Communities Plan, which it has been ongoing for our outreach for about 3 months right now, and in the midst of a year-long process. And so to provide a brief introduction, the Active Communities Plan represents our first update to the citywide bicycle master plan since 2009, which is quite a long time ago. It will represent, once completed, a 10 to 15-year investment plan for active transportation. That will include a new proposed network as well as supportive policies and programs. We call this the Active Communities Plan rather than a bike plan for 2 distinct reasons. The first is that we want to make sure we're being inclusive of all devices that can use the bike network, including scooters and skateboards and power chairs and a number of emerging devices that are coming to market as we speak. We also really want to ensure that this is a plan that's centering the needs of priority communities and vulnerable users, and really working to repair past harm and rebuild relationships and trust in communities where that's really been a problem, especially when it comes to projects involving the bike network. This is a plan that will be adopted in the spring of 2024. We have a comprehensive planning grant to conduct this work with matching funds from the SFCTA. This fits into really a lot of larger city goals and efforts that will be directly informing how this work is done. We have Connect SF, which is looking at our long-range transportation needs. And as part of that, the active transportation study, as well as this SFCTA's SFTP 2050. We also have our Vision Zero policy to try to achieve zero serious and fatal injury collisions in San Francisco. And as part of that, our Vision Zero action strategy for SFMTA. We also have the recently adopted Climate Action Plan and the SFMTA Climate Roadmap with goals towards reducing emissions and increasing mode shift and mode share, especially among active transportation modes. The Active Communities Plan, once adopted, will fit within the larger transportation element being led by the planning department in partnership with the SFMTA and the SFCTA, which is meant to guide transportation as a whole throughout the city into the future. The goals of our plan is first and foremost to advance equity, improving mobility and mobility options for all residents across San Francisco. As part of that work, we want to ensure that we're supporting safety for all road users, helping the city to achieve Vision Zero. We also want to support climate action through the Climate Action Roadmap by being able to foster and encourage mode shift with a variety of different devices that can use the bike network. We also want to support access for all users, and that really includes that we need to look at how we can create networks that are inclusive and welcoming and comfortable and safe for the broadest potential range of users, especially people with disabilities or seniors or families and youth. We also really want to focus on a plan that can deliver real results with real implementation and being able to focus on rapid implementation once we do get this plan adopted. And lastly, we want to work on developing new approaches for our work with the bike network. That means working on how do we create streamlining within our own city process to be able to deliver things more efficiently and flexibly, but also how do we do more appropriate and effective work within different types of communities and really demonstrate that we are aligning our projects with community needs and values. To briefly go over the elements of the active transportation or the Active Communities Plan is first the Active Transportation Network, which we're kind of rebranding the existing bike network so that we can be inclusive of all these different device users. This would include things like potentially adding new and protected bike lanes or looking at where we want to be enhancing or updating our slow streets network or our neighborways. Looking at the potential for car-free streets, places like either Market Street or car-free JFK, but also using our projects to support community-led placemaking in places like the Tenderloin, where we see a really limited amount of open space. How can we use our investments in the active transportation network to help achieve other community goals? It would also include recommendations for supportive facilities like additional parking, bike racks, but also looking at bike lockers and other types of solutions that don't exist right now, like mobility hubs, places where devices can be charged or stored overnight, especially in communities where people may not have access to bike parking and not be able to park their bikes or devices within their own houses, especially for neighborhoods like Tenderloin, where people live in single room occupancy housing. They literally don't have the space for those types of devices. But beyond the infrastructure that we build, we also want to provide recommendations for a range of supportive policies and programs. Those include things like currently our Vision Zero education work, our Safe Routes to School program, which you just heard on earlier tonight, our work for encouragement, including work around Bike Month and bike education classes, but also how we approach micro mobility services and how we can make them more accessible to a broader range of people, including things like our adapted bike share program, which is currently run out of Golden Gate Park to provide adapted bicycles to people with disabilities. And so to recap, we have these 4 key elements of what the Active Communities Plan will represent: the new network, our parking and facilities recommendations, and our programmatic and our policy recommendations. But we've got a long way to go before we get to those recommendations. And really how we get there is between a combination of our outreach and engagement work and our analysis work that are going to be continually informing each other as we move through the rest of the year. Once we get to adoption of the Active Communities Plan, we can start working on securing funding, doing design for priority projects, gaining their approval, and working on implementation. In terms of our outreach and engagement work, as stated earlier, our goal really is to ensure that we can align our projects with community values and ensure that we're rebuilding trust in communities where we have difficult relationships. We have a year-long outreach process that started in January of this year and we're going through January of next year. We've committed ourselves to over 50 events throughout the year, meaning we're doing more than 1 event a week for the rest of the year. And we are having a special focus on doing work in equity priority communities, having partnerships with organizations in equity priority communities as part of that work, and having our materials translated and accessible in Spanish, Chinese, and Filipino. In terms of our partnerships in equity priority communities, we really need to go through a targeted and very intentional process in these communities to really ensure that we can uncover and really explore the challenges that these communities face and really work towards how we can create a shared understanding, shared vision around how active transportation can support these communities' specific needs and values. For this work, we contracted with 5 different organizations across 6 different neighborhoods, including the Bayview Hunters Point Community Advocates, Poder and their Bicis del Pueblo program, the Tenderloin Community Benefit District, and the New Community Leadership Foundation in Western Addition Fillmore. Also, Soma Filipinas in Asoma, and then it's cut off on this screen, I think by the presentation bar. But we are also working with Interethnica for citywide outreach work with Chinese language communities. But to help inform and complement that outreach process, we also have an analysis process that's going on concurrently. And really that is for us to be able to use data and analysis to identify areas of the bike network that we need to be improving the most and to focus our improvements there for the network recommendations. That starts with our Bicycle Network Comfort Index, which is shown here on the left as our draft form of that, which tries to represent the type of amount of stress or comfort that a person would expect to experience when they're riding a bike or a scooter on a specific street across San Francisco. But to complement that, we are doing a resident preference survey with the polling firm EMC, which will be providing statistically significant polling sampling across the city with a special emphasis on our equity priority communities. And we'll be able to use the results of those polls to actually help inform how we can score this Bike Network Comfort Index to actually reflect the way that people in these communities understand and experience their own streets. We'll also be conducting a network analysis to help us understand where gaps are within the network, especially looking at volumes and where people are riding, where they aren't. We'll be conducting an equity analysis that we're building up right now with our 5 community partners to make sure that we are addressing and analyzing issues that are pertinent and specific to each of these communities. We are conducting a collision analysis, looking at specifically for collisions involving bicycles and scooters, not just with vehicles, but also with pedestrians. And when we have a draft recommended network to bring to the public, we'll be complementing that with a network connectivity analysis to be able to demonstrate and show to people what they can gain by being able to implement this network, what areas become more comfortable, where you can access and get to within the network in a comfortable way by being able to connect the network together with these high quality facilities. In terms of what we've already done, we started our work back in October of last year when we contracted with Tool Design as our prime consultant. We've done a lot of background work around plan review and understanding existing conditions. We began our public outreach process in January of this year. Since that time, we've actually now conducted over 20 events and reached over 1,000 residents across those events across the city. We have a technical advisory committee made up of agency representatives that has been helping us inform our work. And we've been able to conduct a fair amount of our analysis work so up to date so far. We just this past week launched our new phase of outreach, which is shown here. Our first phase was really about increasing the visibility of the project and sharing information. Now we are starting to get detailed input from people, and I have with me some QR codes for our survey that we'll also make available online. But we are that's kind of the focus of our second phase of outreach is really trying to understand the barriers that people experience, as well as how do we kind of match up people's need for comfort and safety with the types of projects that we would recommend within their communities. When we get to late summer in August, we'll be bringing draft recommendations to the public in terms of a draft recommended network, as well as draft recommended policies and programs for people to provide direct feedback and input on. And once we get into the late fall, early winter is when we'll be releasing our draft plan document. So people will be able to provide comments again on the recommendations within the format of the draft plan. Once we get to the late winter of next year, that's when we'll be releasing our final plan document, where people will again be able to provide their comments and feedback on that document. And so there will be in total 3 separate phases where the public will be able to have direct input on our plan recommendations before it gets to the SFMTA board. With that, it would be love to take any comments or questions. I also have some project materials that I can hand out to folks that did not get them at the meeting, and we can make sure to share our project information. If you go to the website that's listed on this presentation, you can access our survey directly, and we're very excited to, in the coming week or so, launch some additional project materials that people will be able to explore and interact with the project even more.
Great, thank you, Chris. Do we have questions from our members? I see Member Roselle and Member Levine. And I will just state, we're running a little bit behind on time, folks, so let's keep our questions brief.
I just need to disclose that I'm also to the Lane Community Benefit District is also working on this program as director. I am the one leading that project.
Well, luckily it's an information item, so you don't need to abstain.
That's good.
He does.
Oh, does he? Okay. Member Levine?
Thanks for the presentation. They're very interesting. A couple of related questions very quickly. Right now, is there any specific definition about who and what type of device can use the bike lanes? And then as a follow-on, is there a protocol about who has priority on the bike lanes? Since you're going everywhere from manual scooters to a lot of motorized vehicles.
Yeah, yes, thank you. So there is some body of regulation on what types of devices can use bike lanes. There's existing law and regulation on electric bicycles, quantifying which bicycles generally by the maximum speed that they can reach, which ones are legal to ride within a bike facility and which are not. Then there are other devices like mopeds, for example, are not legal to ride within a bike lane. But we do have this kind of larger emerging, kind of world of devices that are in a little bit more of a gray area. So when you see things like electric skateboards or one wheels or hoverboards, like those are ones where there's still a little bit of a legal gray area. I think that our priority with how we design and implement both facilities and the network is to prioritize our most vulnerable users. And I think that when we look at the spectrum of devices and device users, that also needs to be our focus for how we design and implement those types of facilities. I think that there's one thing that we're very interested in pursuing. We're working with the Mayor's Office on Disability, is how we can design bike network facilities to be welcoming to people with disabilities and users with disabilities. And I think that requires a new lens on how we design those facilities, and also how we think about how users are expected to interact with each other within those facilities.
Yeah, it just seems to me that a public education campaign would be very, very helpful starting now to kind of acclimate the public to what exists now and what is coming. So thank you.
That's a wonderful recommendation. I think that's something that we could potentially pursue through our policy and programmatic recommendations for the plan as well.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Member Daniels, Member Siegel.
Thank you for the presentation. I just have a question around the partners chosen for the equity priority communities. I'm wondering how you chose them, and being a resident of District 10, I really truly admire the work of the community advocates, but I'm concerned about the fact that you've only chosen one partner, or maybe there are more partners, but I would recommend that you get more partners if you want a bigger reach in that neighborhood, because they need to be prioritized. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. So these prior partners were chosen quite a while ago when we were originally developing our grant application with Caltrans for this project, and we actually brought them on as sub-applicants. And we did that to be very intentional about their role and to give them the space to actually directly shape the scope of work and how we approach that work, and to give them that type of additional power rather than putting together a project, then pulling them on board and telling them what to do. And during that period, which was largely back in 2019, it was largely trying to seek out who were the organizations who at that time had the capacity to participate and the interest to participate in this as a project. I think that, beyond these contracted partnerships, I think we are absolutely and always interested in partnerships with other organizations in these neighborhoods. I'll already be doing quite a bit of work in the Bayview. I'm also working on our community shuttle program out there, and there's a new ATP grant program project that we'll be launching very soon. So I have a lot of folks I work with out there, and I do want to make sure that we have really broad representation and visibility in a community like Bayview Hunters Point. To that effect, we'll be at Bayview Sunday Streets. We're going to plan to have a presence at the Juneteenth celebration. We really do want to make sure that we have a lot of visibility and opportunity for folks to directly engage with us.
Great. Vice Chair Siegel.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I was just wondering, when you talk about a network, is there any explicit definitions, like, for example, is there an explicit goal that any given neighborhood would have a safe path to any other given neighborhood, or a path that rates some minimum value on your comfort index that you referred to, or if not, what would meet the criteria for being a network under the goal of the program?
Yeah, I think the specifics of that are still being worked on. We are taking an iterative process for how we build up this project, and we want to ensure that the public input that we're getting now there's an actual opportunity for it to influence the outcomes of the project and the recommendations that we put together. I think that, there's already a lot of existing adopted plans and policies within the city that prioritize things like creating comfortable and connected networks. Certainly our work through Connect SF, the active transportation study, like those are all things that did try to look in a long range fashion at what does it mean to be able to create a connected network that can achieve things like our mode shift goals or our safety goals within the city. And I think we want to use those as a framework for how we approach the development of our network recommendations. I think that the purpose of our network connectivity analysis that we'll be doing really is to have a level of accountability around the network recommendations, to be able to demonstrate, but also to hold us accountable to saying, if we are going to try to create these types of comfortable connected networks that can truly open up access to people within their neighborhoods and to the types of goods and services they need to be able to reach, we need to show that that's actually possible.
Member Ortega and then Member Hope.
Hello, I'll try to keep my question brief. I looked online at all of the upcoming activities and I applaud the number that you're going to try to go to. It's a lot, and I think that it's great that you're trying to make sure that it's an equity plan and that you're really reaching out to underrepresented communities. But I couldn't help but notice that the Castro and Noe Valley have no events until after June. And I would just like to make sure that, as that is the district I represent, that there is at least one event that goes to that district, so that we can make sure that every district has a say.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were at the Castro Farmers Market early this month.
Okay.
But we also want to ensure that we have representation in all districts across all phases of our projects. So to that effect, if there are specific people, organizations, events that you or others would recommend for future event opportunities, we're very interested in holding space for that.
Bro. Hi, a similar question to Member Daniels. Thank you for bringing up the equity partner slide. I was wondering why there was just one group chosen to kind of represent all Chinese language outreach throughout the city instead of by a neighborhood basis. Because I know that there are groups in Chinatown and Richmond for sure that could do outreach or help with outreach, but why was that choice made?
Yeah, thank you. So it's a very arcane reason, but it largely relates to the way that Caltrans identifies disadvantaged community status within the state of California, and they use a more stringent set of guidelines than does MTC or the city of San Francisco. And because of that, there's actually a much more limited geography of neighborhoods that qualify as disadvantaged status communities. And so when we were looking for partnerships and neighborhoods to contract with specifically to win this grant, to be competitive to win this grant, we focused on those communities. We also focused on communities that have had traditionally more difficult relationships with the SFMTA, especially when it comes to bike network projects, and where there's historically larger levels of interest in bike network projects. But we still understood that there was still a strong need to have Chinese language community engagement. And so that was one of the reasons why we brought on Interethnica as a sub to our prime consultant Tool Design in order to do that work. And so far we've done work with CYC, we've done work with CCDC, and we'll be coordinating with the SFCTA's work in the District 1 mobility study to ensure that we're kind of reaching broadly across many of the different Chinese language communities in San Francisco.
Do we have any other questions for members? Seeing none, let's have public comment.
We have no in-person public comment.
Checking for remote public comment. And I'm not seeing no public comment for item 8.
Great, seeing no public comment, this is an information item. Thank you, Chris, for your presentation. Let's move on to item 9. Since we are running limited on time, I am going to actually limit everyone to 1 minute or 1 question, I mean, just unless we all want to be here till 9 o'clock. Let's move on to Vision Zero Speed Management Update, which is an information item.
Hello, good evening, Chair and members. My name is Win Ngo. I'm the Acting Vision Zero Program Manager for SFMTA. I'm coming off of a cold, and so that is why I am presenting to you remotely. Let me get my slides up for you. And could someone confirm that you can see the slides, please?
We can see it.
Great. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick update on how we know that speeding is one of our main causes of severe and fatal traffic crashes here in San Francisco. So I'm here to provide an update on how SFMTA is slowing speeds on our streets to help prioritize street safety. To start off with some good news is that the SFMTA was recently awarded a new federal U.S. Department of Transportation grant called the Safe Streets and Roads for All, which awards us $17 million for a comprehensive speed management project, which we're calling the Western Edition Community Safe Streets Project, and is the hashed area on the map on the slide. And it will include traffic signal upgrades, speed management tools such as 20-mile-per-hour signage and radar speed signs, up to 2 quick builds, education, and work with local communities. San Francisco is leading the state in implementing 20-mile-per-hour zones after the passage of Assembly Bill 43. And these are our 2022 numbers. And thanks to our fabulous sign shops, we introduced new 20-mile-per-hour zones along 28 business corridors, which amounts to about 19 street miles and over 300 signs installed, which was also complemented that you can see on the slide with multicultural education and outreach, including transit shelter ads, digital advertising, as well as direct outreach to merchants and businesses along these corridors. We also conducted some evaluation looking at 9 corridors before and after. You can see from the bar graph on the side that most drivers are driving out or below the posted speed limit, which is what we want to see. Some less great news is we have, for the larger busier arterial commercial corridors like 3rd Street, we see that additional design is needed to slow speeds. So we're looking at what we can do beyond signage and education and outreach, such as speed radar signs for these types of corridors. The SFMTA also recently released a speed management plan, which captures the tools that we are using to slow speeds on SF streets. And this meets one of our recent action strategy commitments and can be found on our speed management project page. The tools on the plan are broadly divided into 3 categories in how we're slowing speeds, how we're creating safer crossings, and what complementary strategies we're also using. And the plan is also divided into 3 main chapters. The first one talking about where we're at and establishing our existing tool set for what we did to slow speeds to date, such as implement 80 miles of road diets since 2002, or for safer crossings, daylighting or putting in red paint at the intersection. And so we've installed daylighting along 100% of our 2017 high injury network. And we're going back to complete, to find some gaps now that the 2022 high injury network update was shared recently. It also talks about our complementary strategies, such as our motorcycle safety program, which provides free urban safety skills training to this vulnerable road user population. The next chapter kind of explains where we're going and what kind of new and expanded tools that we have to slow speeds, such as our plan to deploy our quick builds to the remaining 50 miles of high injury network. What we're doing to improve crossings, such as through the Western Addition project I just shared, and also how we're expanding beyond our left turns pilot to 35 more intersections in the city. And also it touches on our continued community partnerships through our complementary strategies for this work. The last chapter in the speed management plan talks about our future tools. A lot of that is looking at additional legislative authority that San Francisco currently doesn't have. And it looks at things like speed safety cameras, restrictions to vehicle weights and sizes, and speed governors, which are also known as speed limiters, and are a vehicle safety feature that can prevent excess speeds above like a certain threshold. This legislative cycle, Vision Zero is watching closely these two assembly bills. AB 645 looks at establishing a pilot speed safety camera program, and AB 251 looks at convening a task force to look at the relationship between vehicle weights and traffic injuries. This is my last slide, and it is a 2022 kind of end of year summary, looking at all the treatments through our that we installed, and our Safe Streets dashboard you can find on our website, and moving forward will be updated on a quarterly basis. But currently it shows our full year 2022 numbers. And that is my last slide. Hopefully I was close to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Do we have questions from our members on this item? I see Member Ortega and Vice Chair Siegel.
Hi, so I'll try to make these two quick questions. For the next summary, there's two things that I'd love to know. The first is the impact of buses on the slower streets. I know that it shouldn't hopefully matter, but on slower speed limit streets, I'm just curious what the impact to on-time uni buses are and the effect of other traffic would be have on just timely commutes and delays. The second question that I would love to have a better understanding on is, in future, I would hope that we can understand a little bit more on how the speed cameras would work, because there are definitely some privacy concerns in regards to adding speed cameras around the city, especially if it's based off of license plates. So I would like to have that more in depth next time. I don't need an answer on this. These are just two questions I'd like as a follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Ortega. Vice Chair Siegel.
Thank you so much for the presentation. This is just I think a point of perhaps obvious feedback, but if unless I misunderstood, it didn't look like the 20 mile per hour and any of those corridors that received that treatment actually saw significantly lowered speeds compared with prior to the treatment. And that if the ones where the speed is below 20, they were already below 20 before the treatment. So I would just encourage MTA to avoid investing in just updated signage without also infrastructure changes in the future. Based on the evidence that I'm seeing, unless I'm missing something, it doesn't look like a particularly worthwhile investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Siegel. Do we have any other questions from members? Member Roselle and Member Davidson.
Yeah, just real quick to add to Siegel's comments, I do think that there needs to be a level of infrastructural changes to really reduce the speeds aside from the signs. We were the first, actually our community, the Tenderloin was the one that piloted this program, and we have seen some changes, but the outliers are quite extreme. And so those do still need to be addressed. And I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Member Roselle. Member Davidson.
Just a quick comment. I understand that you're still waiting, or what's still needed is the speed safety cameras and the speed governors. I think that those are essential tools in enforcement, and hope we can get state legislation to come around to that. But in the meantime, while we're waiting for that, is there a plan on dealing with sideshows? So we have evidence of sideshows all throughout Ingleside and District 11. And they're becoming more and more prominent in especially some of the larger, flatter blocks. We have, and I hear them even in the middle of the day. So it's not just at night, but it's in the middle of the day. That's when, many people are walking around. Again, I'm riding my bicycle through the neighborhood with my 2 small children. It's extremely dangerous, and I want to flag that and see if there's infrastructure that can be placed while we're waiting for, enforcement.
Do we have a response from the staff on this or?
Yes, hi, thank you. I know we have a sideshow, I don't know if task force is the right word or committee, but it has been discussed, so we are aware of the problem. And I think earlier this year, we had some traffic calming that was installed at one of the intersections. I would have to check with staff to find out the specifics of that, but I'm happy to follow up.
Thank you. I think the assumption is that sideshows happen primarily in the Mission, and it's happening across the city, especially in District 11 I'm representing.
We don't have that many sideshows in the Mission anymore. It's just low riders. Great. Can we open it up for, oh yeah, go ahead.
I could just make a comment in response to Member Davidson's comment that we just recently funded a neighborhood program project, an NTIP as we call it, which is discretionary funding available to each district, which will reset July 1. But we funded one for District 6 for some freeway off-ramp areas to have, I forget what they were called. They were to divert any sideshow activity, and they had a really fun name, yellow bot dots or something like that. It was something.
Dots and rubber bumps.
Bot dots and rubber bumps. So anyhow, it was installed as an NTIP project. Or will be installed.
And maybe when we come up to new business, maybe we can have a presentation on that program, just to see how that's coming along, just for future. Or we can talk offline, either way. Great. Do we have any other comments, thoughts, questions? Otherwise, let's open it up to public comment.
No in-person public comment, Danielle.
Checking for remote comments. And there is no public remote comment for item 9.
Great. We're going to move on to our next item. Thank you for the presentation. We're going to move on to, so we have a couple options here, right? We're running a little bit behind on time. We can either move the TNC item to the next CAC, or if there's a burning appetite to talk about this GC report, we can talk about it now.
We have one more Vision Zero item.
Oh, we have one more Vision Zero. Sorry.
Get close.
Yeah, getting
You
close.
can still make that decision now, though, if you wish.
No, let's go on to Vision Zero because that's another juicy item, and then we'll discuss that. But just putting that out there for folks.
Good evening, council members. My name is Iris Sue, and I'm the lead epidemiologist for Vision Zero within the San Francisco Department of Public Health, the Center for Data Science. I'm going to be presenting the findings of our annual 2022 traffic fatality report. This report is a product of a tight collaboration between Department of Public Health, SFMTA, and the police department. Overall, 2022 saw the highest traffic fatalities in our streets since 2007, 7 years before Vision Zero was adopted in the city. The group that saw the largest increases in fatalities was pedestrians, from 13 in 2021 to 20 in 2022. Those killed in vehicles rose from 12 to 18 in that time span. Since 2005, the overall average of traffic fatalities was slightly less than 30 per year. Compared to that number, the average since 2014, when Vision Zero was adopted, is lower at 29.1. The 39 deaths in 2022 rise far above the Vision Zero program average. Looking at transportation modes, we see that pedestrians are consistently among the most vulnerable road users in San Francisco, accounting for 51% of all fatalities last year. Motor vehicles are the travel mode with the second highest fatality count. Both of these modes saw increases since the previous year. Motorcycles are now being counted as separate from lower powered sit-down mopeds, which are further separated from stand-up powered devices like e-scooters and e-unicycles. Finally, one person was killed while riding a bicycle. Traffic casualties are inextricably linked to their location, and the Vision Zero High Injury Network identifies the corridors where the most severe and fatal injuries in San Francisco are concentrated. DPH released an updated network last November, and we saw a strong representation of fatalities on the network. In addition, we overlaid fatalities with FTC's equity priority communities and found that 44% of fatalities occurred in those communities. These statistics in 2022 are consistent with those presented for 2021. Regarding age distribution, traffic fatalities were overrepresented among people aged 45 to 64 and 65 plus compared to the last 2 years, with fewer fatalities among youth and those 18 to 24. Traffic fatalities are not evenly distributed among racial and ethnic groups. Instead, they were disproportionately felt among Black and white travelers, while Asian and Latino travelers were underrepresented compared to the representation in the total SF population. Notably, fatality trends among Black persons were 30% in 2021 and have significantly decreased to 15% in 2022. Still, they are highly overrepresented compared to the 5% of their total SF population. To briefly discuss select crash characteristics, 2022 had 4 fatalities among riders of stand-up power devices, 8 among solo vehicle parties, and 13 fatalities in the hours between 6 and 10 p.m., which was the mode time period for the city. Finally, let's compare San Francisco's fatality counts with those of other California cities and nationally. Due to the disruptive nature of the COVID-19 pandemic, we opted to compare 2022's figures with 2019. In short, traffic fatalities have trended upwards nationally and across many of California's major cities since the pandemic, regardless of whether the communities adopted Vision Zero or not. Many of these cities experienced their highest fatality counts on record during the pandemic and have remained at elevated rates in 2022. Therefore, the phenomenon of spiking traffic fatalities in recent years is shared across many cities along with San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We're going to open it up to members. Member Roselle.
Yeah, I'm just curious if there's any stats data indicating the number of hit and runs, how many of these crashes may be due to the increased open air drug market and things of that nature. So just wondering if there's any data that says otherwise.
We will have information on hit and runs in our final written report, which will be released hopefully next week. It's under final review in DPH leadership.
Member or Vice Chair Siegel?
Thank you so much for the presentation. Those numbers are obviously really disappointing, and the pedestrian fatalities are particularly shocking. I was wondering if MTA is still committed to and on track to daylight all the intersections on the high injury network, given that that's pretty low hanging fruit as far as an infrastructure change, and would be particularly helpful to pedestrians.
I'd like to pass that question to Wen Lo.
Hi again, this is Win Ngo, Acting Division 0 Program Manager for SFCTA. Yes, today we have daylit 100% of the 2017 high injury network. Last year, the network was updated through 2022 data. And so our next priority is to go back and address those gaps for daylighting.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions from members? Member Bars?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there looks like there's a statistically significant increase in fatalities that happened across the country, and seems to, I can't pull up the slide. Oh, maybe slide 9. Is that fair? Would you, I mean, you don't have the significance, but I'm just guessing.
Between these two time points, and for many of the cities, they did reach record highs during the pandemic. That's not captured completely on this slide. This slide is meant to tell the picture of a pre-pandemic period versus what we saw last year.
Okay. Okay. Is there, I'm just curious, were there any like sort of higher level strategies that are in place in San Diego or San Jose that we should be looking at? Because they seem to have much lower levels of increase in fatalities from 2019 to 2022.
Information on cities' individual implementations of their action strategies or Vision Zero strategies is differentially available. Not every city is as transparent as we are, or try to be at least. There's also differences in their distributions of pedestrian exposure. For example, I can say that San Jose has higher numbers of fatalities among motor vehicles and fewer among pedestrians. That is a different story as what we have here in San Francisco.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from members? Seeing none, can we open up to public comment?
I can just accentuate here. Edward Mason, years ago, there was a report that I saw put out by Division 0 when it was in its infancy. And it was basically the police department that gave a brief summary of what the accident was. And when you read some of that, I came away with, well, these were Darwin candidates. I mean, there was a person that was out in front of City Hall running around on Van Ness Avenue. Another person in the Tenderloin got up on a tanker truck, a gasoline tanker truck, and fell off and under the wheel, so he was counted, okay? So my question is there a report that's going to come out soon that will basically give a brief summary of what the incident was that caused the death? The other one is, are we keeping track of the vehicle types? Have you seen the latest pickup trucks with the bigger wheels and the higher mount? And I heard this on Bloomberg Radio. You know, this is the thing that they sell because they're really macho, but you can't see. So my question is, are we keeping track of the vehicle types that are involved in these accidents and stuff? So this is a real challenge. And whenever I walk, I always stop and look in all 4 directions. And the response I get back from the off drivers, man, they put their brakes on. When I just kind of inch out and stop because I'm anticipating that they're not going to stop. So somehow the message has to get out. That, and also, I see so many people so engaged in their handheld device that, well, I've got this barrier around me and I can just walk into the intersection. And that's something I think that, you know, is that going to be defined in the reports that we have? Thank you, my time's up.
Okay, so I heard 3 different questions. One was about the
Excuse me.
nature of the collision.
We don't need to respond to public comments. I'd be happy to put you two in contact if you would like to follow up. Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So seeing no more public comment, this is an information item, so we can move on to the next item, which is
Could I request just a response on specifically whether vehicle type is accounted for in the data?
We actually track that and we will be including information about vehicle type, large vehicle, but for example, trucks or commercial trucks, for example, light rail involvement, things like that.
yeah, and maybe we can just get a follow-up to send to the CAC afterwards as well too, and then share it with Mr. Mason as well. Of course. Thank you. Let's move on to our next item, which is going to be item number 10, which is Vision Zero. Oh, no, it's not. Sorry. Let me flip the page. Number 11, which is, do we want, as a CAC, to hear this report, or do we want to move on to the next item?
This is the TNC report. It's about ride hailing companies and the data that we've collected over the last few years and the analysis of that data.
It seems like this might engender a lot of discussion, and I would suggest that we put it off to the next meeting. I know I have a lot of questions about it, and I'm sure everyone else does. So I recommend we put it off till the next meeting.
Great. Let's table this item and we'll hear it right at the top of the next CAC, because I do have a lot of questions. I want to make sure that folks are able to answer that accordingly. Great. And then also there was a presentation at the SF Board of Supervisors, so you can also watch the audio and the hearing for that meeting. Oh, today, I'm sorry. At the TA yesterday. Yeah, cool. Great. Let's move on to item number 12, which is going to be the preliminary fiscal year 2023-2024 budget and work program. Presenting will be Lily Yu, Principal Management Analyst. I think she's presenting remotely, right?
Yes.
Great.
So while Lily's pulling up, this is how it works. This is an info item, and then we come back to you for action next month. Lily, you can go ahead and share your slides whenever you're set.
Okay, great. Thank you. Apologize for not being able to present in person as I'm still recovering from a cold. Are you able to see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good evening, Lily Yu, Principal Management Analyst. Today, I'm happy to present to you our preliminary annual budget and work program for fiscal year 2023-2024. This is an information item and we'll return next month to present the proposed fiscal year 23-24 budget and work program. As a recap, the Transportation Authority administers the sales tax program. We function as the congestion management agency for San Francisco. We administer the $10 Prop AA vehicle registration fee, the traffic congestion mitigation tax, or the TNC tax. We act as the local program manager for Transportation Fund for Clean Air, and we operate as the Treasure Island Mobility Management Agency, or TIMA. Activities under the TIMA program are not included in the preliminary budget, so will be incorporated into the proposed budget and work program next month after we present to the TIMA committee in the May-June timeframe. Total revenues are projected to be 182 million and are budgeted to increase by an estimated 19 million from the fiscal year 2023 amended budget. Of note is the sales tax revenues. We are proposing a $112 million sales tax revenues this year, and it's only a slight increase of 1% or 1.1 million compared to our budgeted sales tax revenues for fiscal year 2023. And this is due to slow growth leading into the next fiscal year, relating to higher interest rates and reduced consumer spending. Vehicle registration fees are projected to slightly decrease. The decline is due to having fewer vehicles registered in San Francisco, and it's consistent with population trends that we've seen during the pandemic. However, traffic congestion mitigation tax is projected to be 10.2 million, and that's budgeted to increase by 2.7 million from last fiscal year. This is in alignment with the Controller's Office projections. However, revenues continue to be affected by changes in travel demand brought on by the pandemic. Program revenues are projected to increase by 15.4 million to a 53.2 million in fiscal year 2024. And these revenues are mostly project specific under our role as the San Francisco Congestion Management Agency, including grant funding for the Yerba Buena Island West Side Bridges project and the I-280 southbound Ocean Avenue off-ramp realignment project. Next, I'll go over our expenditure budget. The majority of our budgeted expenditures are related to capital projects under the sales tax programs. The projects listed here represent the largest anticipated reimbursement requests for the current fiscal year. The primary drivers include SFMTA's light rail vehicle procurement, followed by muni facility projects, including 1399 Marin Street and Patrol Yard. For Prop AA, the projects with the largest anticipated reimbursement requests are listed here and collectively account for about 60% of fiscal year 2024 budget. This includes San Francisco Public Works Richmond Residential Street Pavement Renovation Project and SFMTA's El Tervel Transit Enhancement Project. Total expenditures are budgeted at 258.1 million, and this is a 75 million or 40% increase from the past fiscal year. Of the total expenditure budget, capital project costs, which are awarded to grants like the SFMTA, are at 222.4 million. And this is primarily due to increases in the sales tax program capital expenditures. In addition to capital project costs mentioned earlier for the sales tax program and Prop AA program, capital project costs for CMA program are budgeted for 52 million, and mainly for the construction activities for the West Side Bridges project and design work for YBI Hillcrest road improvement projects. Capital project costs for the TNC program are budgeted for 4.5 million, and these are based on allocations made for SFMTA's Vision Zero Quick Build program and SFMTA's residential traffic calming program. Administrative operating costs are budgeted to be 13.9 million, and that is a 14% increase. These are operating expenditures that include personnel, administrative, and commissioner-related expenses. Just to note that administrative operating costs only represent 5% of the total expenditure budget. Oh, sorry. Next, debt service costs, we are budgeting 21.7 million, and this includes a scheduled bond principal payment that's related to our 2017 sales tax revenue bonds. Also related are fees and interest expense for the expected drawdown for the revolving credit loan agreement. Because our revenues are 182 million and expenditures are 258 million, we will need to draw down about 75 million on the revolving credit agreement in order to pay for our expenditures. We have a 125 million revolving credit loan agreement to support our interim borrowing program. However, we'll continue to monitor our capital spending and we'll bring back to this committee and the board for approval before each drawdown is made. And so next, I'll quickly go over our work program for the next fiscal year. Many of these efforts will be familiar to you and many of them are just rolling over from last year. I'll go over just the major highlights or notable efforts. For our congestion management work, we will expand our COVID era congestion tracker to include additional metrics, and we'll also conduct the travel demand market analysis. We'll use recommendations from the San Francisco Transportation Plan 2050, which was adopted by the board in December 2022 as the basis for San Francisco's input into MTC's Plan Bay Area 2050 Plus and Transit 2050 Plus. We'll continue to scope the environmental phase of the Bayview Caltrain Station location study in coordination with the SF Planning Department and Caltrain, as well as the Bayview community. We received a Caltrain planning grant for the Brotherhood Way Safety and Circulation Plan, along with a Prop K appropriation match to develop active transportation improvement concepts and engaging community stakeholders in the Southwest region of the city. We were also awarded a federal grant to implement conduct a study for the Vision Zero Ramp Phase 3 project. This is a conceptual design effort focusing on the safety at I-280 and US 101 on and off freeway ramps. We're also going to continue leading 4 neighborhood transportation improvement studies in districts 4, 1, 6, and 2. We'll continue to work with our board members to scope out potential NTIP planning efforts in districts 3, 9, and 7, as well as anticipate seeking NTIP and/or other funding to advance recommendations for districts 5 and district 7 NTIP. On our forecasting and data section, our technology data and analysis division provides travel forecast and analysis for several TA studies, including the portal or the downtown rail extension and the US 101-280 managed lanes study. We're planning to release the next major SF Champ release, this version 7, in this coming year. And for every 2 years, we prepare and update the San Francisco Congestion Management Program. For the first time this year, the 2023 CMP update will include a fully interactive online version. And we'll continue to work with SFMTA to provide input to state and federal mobility rulemaking opportunities and provide input on autonomous vehicle policies. In terms of funding, we'll work with project sponsors, our board, and the public to develop and adopt the first Prop L strategic plan and 5-year prioritization programs. They'll identify the projects to be funded for each of the 28 Prop L programs over the next 5 years. We'll continue our ongoing roles to administer Prop AA, TFCA, and TNC tax programs to allocate and prioritize projects for grant funding. And in terms of capital projects, we're leading the construction effort for the YBI West Side Bridges project with a groundbreaking ceremony to be scheduled for June 2023, and construction will start in fiscal year 2024. We're leading several project developments, including design work for the I-280 Ocean Avenue southbound off-ramp realignment, design phase work on the YBI Hillcrest Road improvement, and initiating the Pennsylvania Avenue extension pre-environmental bridging study. Major efforts under project delivery are included on this slide, and it includes providing technical oversight and project development support to the Pennsylvania Corridor Electrification Project, and moving forward with the Caltrain Downtown Rail Extension project development efforts. In terms of transportation and accountability, this represents our ongoing agency operational activities and administrative processes. And finally, I'll go over our budget process through adoption. This is the first round, presenting the information item to you and then to our board on May 9th. After that, we'll be back and propose the final proposed budget to you on May 24th, followed by June 13th board meeting will serve as the public hearing on the final proposed budget and for final approval on June 27th. And this concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. Can we open it up to questions from our members? Do we have any questions from members? Vice Chair Siegel?
Yeah, I just wanted to really quickly say thank you so much for this detailed presentation. Not only is it a really helpful look at the budgeting process, but it's also a really helpful look ahead to anticipated funding requests over the next fiscal year and TA projects. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank
I will say as a District 9 resident, I am super excited to see a mission community-based transportation plan in the works. I know the community's been asking for a long time. So very, very excited for that look ahead. Any other questions, thoughts from members? If not, let's move it to public comment. Mr. Mason?
Yes, thank you. Regarding the following of the autonomous vehicles, I assume we are spending the money to monitor what's going on and the whole activity. MTA just had a presentation yesterday on autonomous vehicles. And I asked the question, how much money is MTA spending monitoring? Of course, it was public comment, no answers back. But the facial expressions were, oh yeah, well, I assumed there was a lot of money being spent within MTA to monitor the autonomous vehicles. So it just irritates me to see that we have to spend money to monitor new technology. They want to come in and do it, build your own track to do it on. Why are we having to spend our hard-earned dollars on the new technology? Second is Yerba Buena Island. The developer is making money hand over fist selling the condos over there. And we're having to spend money to improve the roadway on and off the freeway, on and off the bridge and that. It just irritates me. There was already an existing bridge there, an existing roadway, fine. You're going to expand it, okay. For the new people that want to live there, let the developer do it. Don't put the burden on me, especially now with the austere times with the upcoming budget and all. But I'm just getting so irritated that we are being taken advantage of by these agreements that get done at high levels. And then we're stuck here at the lower levels having to fund it out of our precious dollars that we're here for. So that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Do we have any other comments from the public?
Yes, checking. Oh,
No, go ahead. Thank you.
checking for public comment. We do have one public comment. Roland, oh, go ahead. I'm trying to. Okay, Roland, go ahead.
Okay.
Your 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Danielle. I'm sorry about that. So my question is about slide 10, which talks about the Bayview Catering Station location study, and obviously I agree with this. But what I'd like you to do is to circle back to December 13, Resolution 23-24, item 11, which is to approve the Executive Director's Performance Objectives for 2023. You'll find that the Bayview Station is item number 25. Now, what concerns me is that item number 26 is completely missing, and I'm going to read it to you. So this is Tilly's performance objectives, okay? 26 is bring forward a sales tax appropriation request to develop a planning concept for improved transit connections across the US 101 corridor between Candlestick Point and there's a typo here. It should say Bay Shore, not Bayview. between Candlestick Point and Bayshore Catherine Station. Continue to coordinate with the City of Brisbane, San Mateo, CAG, and City Departments, SFMTA and SF Planning Department on bi-county transportation improvements on both sides of the county line, including Geneva, Harmony, BRT underpass at US 101, traffic calming in the areas being studied by SFMTA in the Visitation Valley Community-Based Transportation Plan, and Brisbane's Geneva roadway extension and related transportation facilities from its Bayland Developments Project, EIR. Now, I've already brought this to the CAC's attention back in February, and I cannot stress you the urgency of moving ahead with this because the draft EIR is out there. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or public comment from the public?
Checking for additional comment. Thank you, Roland, for that. Thank you.
Great, and if staff could follow up with Roland about that offline, that'd be great. Seeing that we have no items, this is an information item, we're gonna move on to item number 13, which is the introduction of new business. Do any CAC members have introduction of new business? Member Levine?
Yes, I'd like to see about getting an update on the status of the Caltrain electrification project. It seems, talking with people that use it going down the peninsula, there are days when it operates now on an hourly basis when they're doing some work on the electrification. And even with that, the other day, the train was an hour late on top of running this really erratic schedule. So it'd be really helpful, I think, to see what the status of the electrification project is right now, and whether anything can be done to give a little bit more confidence to the public that's using it at this point. Thank you.
Thanks, Member Levine. And would it be, I mean, for that item particularly, could we have a presentation on that next month, or is there a timeline on that?
Muting you accidentally. Let me check how full our agenda is. We can easily pull the information together though. And just to clarify, I think Member Levine, your question is about people riding the current diesel railroad, which has changed schedule to accommodate construction.
It's screwing up the schedule.
Got it.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Member Levine, Member Roselle, and Member Ortega, and Member Siegel.
I think Siegel might have been before me.
Member Siegel?
Just two quick items. First, I would love to, I think from MTA, I would love to just get a estimate of the cost and feasibility of daylighting all intersections in San Francisco for pedestrian safety. And then the other is that, my interest in the AV issue was also piqued by the TNC item that we weren't able to get to tonight. And I would love an explainer for us on what are the rulemaking bodies for San Francisco right now pertaining to AVs. What levers do we have for regulation? What are the impacts we're seeing on our streets? And what are we spending on such programs? Thank you.
Great, and can we have that expert, like that information to kind of go in line with, the TNC report the next time, for the next item? Great, thank you. And I think for the crosswalks, maybe within the next 2 to 3 months, does that work for staff capacity?
Yes, I can also say there is a really fast piece of legislation in Sacramento that would require daylighting on every intersection, like everywhere. And I will share with you MTA's concerns. They worked a little flexibility into it because there are very site-specific considerations where it may not make sense. But timely question for you.
Great, thank you. Member Roselle?
Yeah, I would ask a request for information on the subcontractors' requirements to meet ADA requirements. I've definitely noticed on the Safer Taylor project, there's been 3 incidences where I've reported on multiple occasions about where the curb ramps, there was issues with curb ramps, and there's actually one bulb out where there's no temporary curb ramp, so people are actually having to ride out into the middle of the street and jeopardize their own lives to do so. And was just actually on Larkin Street heading up towards Reading Elementary and saw another curb ramp under a subcontract where that was also so steep. And a gentleman had just stopped me to tell me how he had just helped a senior that was falling out of her wheelchair there. So these are very concerning to me.
Thank you, Member Roselle. Member Ortega, and then Member Davidson.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I just have a quick question on, I would love to have some information on how SFMTA rolled out their planned maintenance schedule. And I bring this up because last weekend I was gonna take the J and then it just never came. And then a bus finally showed up and then 2 buses showed up at the same time. And there was no announcement at the station or any of the stations on the line, except when we got to downtown, we got off at Van Ness. There was a huge announcement. We saw all the signage and I was like, this would have been really helpful if I had known that at the stop going backwards, right? And so I guess I would just really like to understand how their thought process is, because if the idea is that, oh, we'll get all the people that are leaving from downtown, if you're trying to head to downtown, it feels very exclusive. And it was fine. I didn't have to be anywhere, but I just keep thinking about all of the times that if I really want to be somewhere, I don't always take a meeting because I don't trust it. And that kind of just I'd love to get an understanding for a scheduled site track maintenance, like how they actually go about announcing that, because there was no signage at the stop. There wasn't like a little announcement on the screen broke. And I just didn't see it all along the line. So that'd be really appreciated.
Great. Thank you, Member Ortega. And let's work with staff offline to see if we could either get the information or a presentation on that. Member Davidson, the Member O.
I'd love to start a discussion on enforcement and understand the tools available outside of what is legislated at the state level. I know it's it can be a very difficult issue, but it's also like the other side of the coin for safer infrastructure.
Vision zero enforcement. Right.
Well, it's like reckless driving. Blowing through stop signs, blowing through signals. There's a signal in my neighborhood that goes to the 280, but you have to walk across the 280 bridge. And it has been mowed down like 3 different times to the point where somebody like pasted a sign and then it got mowed down again. And as a pedestrian standing there, you're pretty scared crossing the street. Anyway, I'm gonna go on. Yeah.
Let's work with staff offline on that, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe we can if
That's
there's something pointed on that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Member Ho.
I just want to echo Member Ortega. Thank you for bringing up the concerns about notifications for folks, because I take the N every single day for work and to get to see my family and whatnot. And I just got a notification on my phone today that was like, oh, it's going to be bus service this weekend, and I got no other notification other than from my phone, and that was from a transit app, not from Uni. So if we can get how they do their outreach, what their plan is for it, and why signage is so limited, that would be great.
Great, thank you, Member Ho. I have a couple items, just particularly, I'd like to get an update on the Truro bus yard. And then I would also like to get an update on the Treasure Island mobility plan, particularly for all the modes that are available on the island as a whole. So, do you have any other items from members? Member Bars?
Not an item, but not an item, but could we get a check on the queue of all of these item requests?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a look ahead, but yeah, we can definitely
Okay.
present, maybe at the next, CAC, what our queue is looking like.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to add to the queue? Seeing none, do we have any public comment on any of these items?
Yes, checking on public comment, and we have one public comment from Roland. Roland, go ahead. Go ahead, your 2 minutes starts now.
Okay, thank you, and please interrupt me if what I'm about to say is inappropriate. I want to give you a very brief update on the Caltrain electrification status. The reason you haven't got a letter from me yet is that we got a FOIA with the FDA. And so can I give you an update on Caltrain?
Yes, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
Okay. So the first thing that's happened is that they failed something called a short circuit testing since last November. What basically has happened, they've somehow managed to cross wire every single substation between San Jose and San Francisco. That's why the test is failing. Now that news was brought to the board, I believe it was at the March meeting, and I will send you the direct link so that you can listen to what Supervisor Walton had to say about this. Now, the FTA rating right now is that this project is at risk. That's why I got a FOIA, it's a Freedom of Information Act. It's like a PRA, but at the federal level. The other thing is that you're going to see coming across the board, they're going to be asking you for another 4 trains, and let me explain to you why. They've got an FFGA that says they're going to get X number of dollars. Actually, now they are $2.5 billion. And that FFGA mandates that they increase their seating capacity by 10%. They're not even close, even if they've got 7-car trains. But what's actually worse is that, I don't know if you know this nonsense with high-speed rail in different platform heights, is that if they open the other set of doors, they're going to be losing 10 seats per car. That is 70 seats per train. If they run 6 trains an hour, it's 420 seats. So that, I want to give you a heads up of what you're going to be getting from me in the next couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland, for your comment.
Do we have any other public comment, both in the room or on the operator? Mr. Mason?
Yes, number.
We're still on new business. Are you waiting
New
for
business.
general? Yeah.
Great. Seeing no new items, let's move to general public comment.
For general public comment, may I request that the members of this committee, when you do speak into the microphone, kind of beat the microphone, get up real close to it, because I'm sitting back here and even if you got the red on, it still doesn't work. Corporate commuter buses, there was an article in the Examiner that talked about Google and the fact that, they were going through some fiscal distress. And they said, we really took to heart to look at our expenses. And we determined that, maybe we baked a few extra muffins for the free cafeteria. And then they said, and then we discovered that there was only one person on a bus. And now, when I read that in context, I said, oh, they're pulling my leg because they're, associating muffins, having extra muffins and spending money, and then only having one person on the bus. But I will agree that, yes, there's many times when I've only seen an empty bus or one person on a bus through the reflective light that comes through that I see in the morning. So I guess there's an admission by Google that in fact they are operating these buses with only one passenger on. If that be the case, then I would propose that they are actually a net generator of pollution, not a net saver of pollution, as was done through the SF Champ program that we had here. So I will just leave you with that. And I'm glad to see that there's some interest here to bring up the corporate commuter buses, because when you have Caltrain operating at only 1/3 capacity during the morning commute and the rest of the time. Again, these corporate commuter buses reflect a culture of convenience, satisfying that culture of convenience as opposed to having to make that extra effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. Do we have any other public comment virtually?
Yes, checking for public comment. We do have one public comment from Roland. So.
Yes, thank you. And this is going to be very quick. It's for this. First of all, I cannot thank you so much for Zoom, YouTube, everything else. It's just so wonderful. I really appreciate it. But you might like to point to members of the public who do not see the raised hand icon at the bottom of the screen. Is that it is buried behind the reactions icon. You got to click on that first, and then it'll show you the raised hand. So maybe you lost some public comment there. The other thing is that what I said earlier about live streaming to YouTube is actually not true. I went to your SFCTA channel and you're not live streaming. It's very easy to do. It's an option in Zoom. You look it up and it'll tell you exactly in Zoom how you can live stream Zoom to YouTube. Now, let me tell you why in closing, and once again, thank you so much for considering why it's significant to me. Because if you live stream to Zoom, I'm able to use my Roku stick and cast the CAC meeting to a larger screen. So that helps me out rather than, being desk bound as I am right now. And thank you for your consideration, and thank you for everything, and good night.
Thank you, Roland. Do we have any other public comment virtually? I just actually did have one, to Mr. Mason's point, particularly around the corporate commuter buses. Do we maybe have like a timeline on when we can maybe get a presentation on some of the Google buses?
We have one scheduled for next month.
Great, thank you. Perfect.
Yeah, it'll be with MTA.
Great.
Just a quick comment regarding Mr. Mason's previous comments about the autonomous vehicles. If they can monitor those vehicles so closely, the city certainly can monitor these Google buses, and they should put their priorities somewhere else.
Thank you. Member Rizzo?
Just a request that there be a map shown as well as to indicate where those buses can and cannot be used.
And just for clarity, they're the Google buses and the corporate commuter buses are allowed to use SFMTA stops currently, right? Or public bus stops.
Sorry. Yeah, I just didn't have a discussion because it's new items, but if they participate in the program, they're allowed to use certain bus stops.
Great. And maybe we can have that like included as well on the map as well.
Thank you.
Great. Do we have any other items? We're way past time. Seeing none, let's adjourn this meeting.